Assalamualaikum and a very good day to all present today. Welcome to the third round of English debate competition, InterVarsity Science E-Debate Challenge 2031. The motion for this debate is, this house believes that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars. I will be the chairperson and the timekeeper for room 2. Let me now introduce the debaters to you. Acting as the government team for this debate is the team from KUPTMA with Mr. Atik as the Prime Minister, Mr. Fahmi as the Deputy Prime Minister, and Ms. Farhana as the Government Whip. Acting as the opposition team for this debate is the team from UUMA with Kirtiga Nerdilo as the opposition leader, Durgashini James as the second opposition speaker, and Parminjit as the opposition whip. Our panel of educators consists of Mr. Layo Jun, Ms. Nurul Najwa binti Zulkafli, Tuan Ashraf Jauhari bin Tan Ali, Amirul Haikal bin Muhammad Razaimi. Now, we come to our debate today. To open the case from the government team, I call upon the Prime Minister to start the debate session.
Testing, just checking again. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to all of those who are here today and those who are watching. The motion for today is this House believes that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars. And as the Prime Minister of the government side, we are agreeing with the motion for today's debate. Now, before I move on any further, I would like to state the government side definitions for today's motion. First of all, with the term Star Trek. Star Trek is an American science fiction media franchise originating from the 1960s television series Star Trek created by Gene Roddenberry, whereas Star Wars is an American space opera media franchise created by George Lucas, which began with the eponymous 1977 film and quickly became a worldwide phenomenon. Now, for scientifically sound, this term means that the science projected in those two franchises are the closest to today's modern day science. So, what the motion is suggesting that the science in Star Trek is more accurate or closer to the real world science that we have rather than the Star Wars franchise. Before I start with my actual argumentation, I would like to provide a burden of proof that the opposition side would have to answer. The burden of proof is that the opposition side have to prove that Star Trek is more scientifically Star Trek is not more scientifically sound than Star Wars. Now, currently right now, our world is advancing in terms of science and research. So, because of that, we are developing a lot more of technologies and to make the world a better place to help to make it easier for us to live our life. So we want to we see that in Star Trek is that they have a lot more similarities in terms of technology and science to the real world. So that is our status quo for today. Now moving on for my first argumentation is that Star Trek is more closer to the real world. And this is because Star Trek is a sci-fi franchise and it is intended to be a sci-fi franchise. Not like Star Wars, which is Star Wars is a fantasy franchise. The Star Wars have one basis where they are focusing on the Federation, and they have a princess that is needed to be saving, which is a basic format for fantasy stories. Therefore, in order for Star Trek to comply with the sci-fi needs, the franchise itself must widely influenced by real-life science with a hint of fiction based on the creator's creativity and imagination. And so Star Wars does a very good job at that, at fulfilling this criteria. Star Trek is very closely related to real life in terms of settings and science. Which is what we are talking about today. Star Trek setting presents an idealistic version of past scarcity of USA, which is represented by the Federation, which is the main group in Star Trek, and their counterparts, who all have direct mirror images of various states and cultures on Earth, such as the Cardassians, which are representing the USSR, the Klingons, which are representing the pre-World War II Japanese, the Ferengi, which represents Jewish stereotype, and also Romulus, which represents Roman or Byzantium, just to name a few. But what are the significance of what I mentioned just now? Just because they are closely related or closely pictured to be our real life counterparts, what are the significance that we have to prove today that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars? Well, this is because of Star Trek is relatively closer in terms of settings and technology based on our real life. Therefore, the science that they use are relatively similar as well. For example, Star Wars have a mechanism in their fighting style in what they use to fight, which is the Force, which is for easier understanding is basically magic. They have nothing. It comes from the palm they have without doing anything. That it's just suddenly there. Whereas Star Trek have none at all, which is similar to our real life world. We don't have magic here. We have to use a medium to recreate what is called magic or even misdirection. But in terms of magic itself, it does not even exist in the real world. Second, Star Wars already have achieved perfect cloning, where Star Trek have not even achieved that. Again, to make this clear, the I think the armies on the rebellion is actually a clone of one person, and because of that, they mass produce the clones to make an army. But Star Trek doesn't have that. Star Trek have all individuals and not their clones. They only have one version of themselves. So, therefore, we can see then that Star Trek is really similar to our in real life world rather than Star Wars, which basically means that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars. And before I end my argumentations, before I end my turn, I would like to stress again, as the Prime Minister, that this motion for today, this House believes that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars, is to be accepted fully. And with that, I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. To open the case from the opposition team, I call upon the leader of opposition to continue the debate session.
Okay. I believe I'm audible, right? Hello?
Yes.
Yes,
Am I audible?
yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I would begin my speech in three, two, one. So just wow, the government just mentioned that label Star Wars as a fantasy. Okay. I would like to say that we do agree that it is a fantasy, but we definitely oppose that it is more we definitely oppose the idea that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars. Okay, let me define what fantasy is. Fantasy is a faculty or activity of imagining impossible or improbable things. Um, but you see, let me picturize this. Many years ago, going to the moon or stepping your foot in the moon was a mere fantasy as well. But today we have proven it scientifically, and the advancement of technology has brought so many impossible things into reality. So there are many possibilities. So today's motion, I would like to bid a very good afternoon to everyone over here, and I would move to today's motion. So today's motion is something similar to the statement of may the force be with you versus the live long and prosper. So goes with lightsabers versus the phasers, warp drive versus the hyperdrive. And the opposition team would like to oppose that the House believe that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than the Star Wars. We believe that Star Wars makes more sense scientifically compared to Trek. The casual movie watchers or the usual movie goers fail to see that there's not much difference between Star Trek and which is a science fiction franchise, and Star Wars, which debuted on movie screens. But today, we would like to see how Star Wars contain more scientific element than just mere fantasies. So it is common for Star Trek fans to have the idea that the word Trek is better. Star Trek is better because it portrays a complex science-based technology where the future and diverse species unite for the betterment of all. But Star Wars is more than that. Moving on to my argument why Star Wars is scientifically sound than Star Trek is because Star Wars the Star Wars universe is able to portray a completely diverse set of worlds containing variety of inhabitants. You might wonder if there are possibilities for such world to exist in our universe. It is one of the questions which is often raised among human beings. But I would like to state a fact that until 1991, the only planets known to humans were in our solar system. But in that very same year, astronomers discovered the first extrasolar panel, now dubbed as exoplanets, by measuring the Doppler shift of stellar spectral lines, effectively witnessing the planet play gravitational tug of war with its parent star as its orbits. So, due to the technology advancements, the astronomers have refined their planet hunting skills and found more than 30 exoplanets. And doesn't this provide a higher relativity of scientifically sound compared to Star Trek? I would like to arise this question to the government team. The entire scenario changed along with the launch of NASA's Kepler mission, which continually monitored the patch of sky for brightness variation in 150,000 stars. It is agreed that the dip of brightness can be caused by a planet passing in front of its star, blocking a small fraction of its light. As a matter of fact, in his 4-year run, Kepler detected and confirmed nearly 2,000 planetary systems, ranging from hot Jupiters to frozen rocky worlds. Intriguingly, select a few lie within the Goldilocks zone where the liquid water could exist because the planet isn't too hot, or too cold. This enormous results in exploring the ability of habitating or habitation could prove how Star Wars is beyond fantasy and in fact makes more scientific sense compared to the Star Trek. Moving on to my next point. Moving on to my next point. Star Wars provided an insight about how the advancement of robotics is useful. In this digitalized era, robots tend to be on extreme or the other days. One kind is found Mars battlefields in operating rooms. These robots are extension of humans and they are rarely autonomous because the humans are always in the loop. Okay, let me give you an example. A delivery robot could pass out towels and medication, and if we were about to get stuck in a living room, the machine could call a command center or a particular technician to figure out what the problem and free the robot. So every time a person made a fix, the robot would keep that new information and use it to perform differently in the next time it leaves the room. So with the human mix, the robot could learn from its mistake and continually push towards 100% of autonomy. This kind of advancement is definitely proved in Star Wars, which is not proved in Star Trek. As for R2D2 and his friends in Star Wars, we are not that far from personal robots. I don't think we'll have to clean our houses in 20 years because we'll have robot helpers. I'm not sure what the cost or if people will psychologically be ready to give up that part of their lives, but we'll have the software and the hardware in place to make it happen. And this is one of the major point which proves that how Star how Star Wars makes more sense than Star Trek. Moving on to the next point that I would like to elaborate on is physics and the force. What would it be like to master the force and lift a spaceship with the tip of your finger like Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back? Okay, the research by the School of Physics stated that there are few things that you might want to consider. One explanation is that the dark force Vader attracts the light charge of his victim, leaving the person unbalanced with an excess of dark change. In these cases, all the dark changes then try to come along and squeezing and nearly choke the person to the death. This means that unlike the electric charge particles with equal force, charges and attract charges attract and repel when they have different charges. So, if we were to study the force from a subatomic level, we should consider that if any other interaction we know in nature, therefore exist force carriers. These are the particles that give rise to forces between other particles. And for example, another example that I would like to give would be the electromagnetic force between two electrons can be explained by the exchange of virtual photons and gravitation by the exchange of virtual gravitons. Therefore, the two force charges should have carrier. This is all proven in Star Wars and not Star Treks, which makes it more scientifically sound, which makes more and scientifically sound than the other. Um, should the Large Hadron Collider search for these now? Sorry. So I would like to rest my case by stating that Star Wars definitely makes more sense compared to the Star Trek and it is more scientifically sound. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for their speech. To continue our debate today, I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for their side.
A very good morning. I bid to the dear opposition team, adjudicators, and also Miss Jefferson, also the audience who are watching us right now. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I would explain again to the government, to the audience today. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are trying to tell you is that Star Wars isn't isn't science fiction at all, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Science fiction is often first thing, let me define science fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, science fiction is a genre of fiction literature whose content is imaginative but based in science. It relies heavily on scientific facts, theories, principles, and support and set it for its settings, characters, themes, and plot lines. So while the storylines and elements of science fiction source are imaginary, they are usually possible according to science, or at least plausible, ladies and gentlemen. So Star Wars isn't science fiction. It doesn't intend to be science fiction because Star Wars is like the Prime Minister already mentioned, it is an epic fantasy tale, a fairy tale with strong Japanese cultural influence that uses technology advanced setting, ladies and gentlemen. So, well, Star Trek is setting presents an idealistic vision of post-scarcity, like what have been mentioned by the Prime Minister about the USA representing the Federation and so on. So, next, well, in Star Trek, the largest topic are about exploring strange new worlds, discovering impressive new technologies, and and merits of various societies, ladies and gentlemen. While Star Wars are giving you tales about heroism in the face of in the face of evil, the dark Sith, Darth Vader, and so on, and personal redemption, ladies and gentlemen. So the closest connection Star Wars has with Star Trek is only the first word of the name. Theme, setting, and just about everything else is completely different. These two franchises are not in the same genre, and the use of magic is prominent in Star Wars, ladies and gentlemen. Well, because there are even princesses that need to be that need saving. You know, Princess Leia, the beautiful one. I don't know of a more common fairy tale trope. As any good fairy tale is also not set on future Earth. Well, it's because the Star Wars itself, I mentioned at the beginning of the movie, a long time ago in a far, far away, a far, far away galaxy. So next, ladies and gentlemen, so one thing I would like to touch is about the physics and the force. So, ladies and gentlemen, just now the opposition leader said the positive energy and negative energy will repel to each other. So, how did how did the clashes of lightsaber happen if the positive and positive would the positive and positive would be repelling each other, ladies and gentlemen. So it is irrelevant for today's motion, ladies and gentlemen. So now let's proceed to the point from we, the government team, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to approach this subject logically as Spock would, ladies and gentlemen. So we aren't going to talk about which canon is better. So it's obviously Star Trek, but instead we're going to focus on uh, who's delivering more scientifically sound movies, ladies and gentlemen. So generally, what was considered uh, ge- ladies and gentlemen, Star Trek versus Star Wars debates has already taken place over countless forum for years, ladies and gentlemen. So there are plenty material to dive into. So generally, what was considered canon before Disney acquired Lucasfilm and before J.J. Abrams rebooted Star Trek is going to admissible here as well. So what is shown going to be favored over what is said. Star Wars Star Destroyer is reported as being able to generate power equal to 1% of the sun's energy output. This is ridiculously inconsistent with the actual observed performance of Star Destroyers in the films, ladies and gentlemen. So one major complication is that while Star Trek writes at least attempted to create plausible explanation for the technology, Star Wars does what it wants by throwing in random technobabble. When taken alongside the Force, it's easy to see why some fans consider Star Wars to be an epic space fantasy rather than a science fiction tale. With all that in mind, let's dig into the first one, ladies and gentlemen. Star Trek and Star Wars both feature great robots characters. So C3PO, R2D2, and Data are all fan favorites. C3PO is a yellowish droid who talks a lot, while Data is a yellowish android who talks a lot. So far, it is pretty similar, but unfortunately for C3PO, his tech just isn't up to scratch. C3PO was pieced together from junk parts by a crazy kid, whereas Data was carefully designed by a mad scientist, ladies and gentlemen. So Data also has the advantage of being fully functional, hyper-intelligent, and integral part of Enterprise crew. So C3PO gets in the way while R2D2 is a little more than a gun sight on wheels. So sure, either of these robots can do chores for you, but let's face it, Data would do a better job every time, ladies and gentlemen. So 1 point for Star Trek, ladies and gentlemen. So next, medical facilities. This one, another simple call. If the Skywalkers live in the United Federation of Planets, they wouldn't need to worry so much about losing their limbs. Yes, they are able to get them replaced with cybernetics, but Bonds would probably be able to attach the original. Some of you may like the idea of bionic upgrades, but we prefer to keep our real arms and legs. So everything short of intended done with attempts to be curable on the Enterprise. With technology like tricorders that can instantly diagnose almost all ailments, Star Trek takes this one with ease. So there's two over Star Wars Zero, ladies and gentlemen. Now, next, photon versus photon torpedoes. Weapons are another controversial topic. Boba's Fett ships, Slave 1 is described as having 64,000 gigawatt lasers and 190 megaton missiles. In contrast, the Puny Enterprise D only has 3.6 gigawatt main gun and 64 megaton missile. This is where Rom Locken's rule from earlier kicks in. Some of the energy readings suggested for Star Wars laser weapon would instantaneously vaporize any unshielded craft, not to mention the atmosphere in them. In rather spectacular fashion, he explained nothing in the physical behavior of this weapon support this value. With that established, the case becomes a lot more clear-cut. In the article that Loken devotes several paragraphs to explain all the ways in which Star Trek weapons are more superior and plausible uh, compared to Star Wars. So weapon tech is also not so one more point will be given to Star Trek again, so, ladies and gentlemen. So from here, I'll already give you three things that making Star Trek is more plausible uh, than the Star Wars movie. By that, me as the second but the Deputy Prime Minister agree. Uh, ex, uh, agree to for today's motion. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for their remarks. Now, I call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue the case of their side.
Okay, firstly, am I audible? Can you all hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Alright. So, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. A very cheerful good morning to everyone who's with us here. And today I would like to light my views from the opposition side about the motion that this House believes Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars. Well, I'm from the opposition team, are strongly opposing this motion. And before going into my respective point and substantive material, I would like to rebut the points that were given by the government side. Okay, firstly, as a Star Wars fan, it is very, very upsetting and disappointing for me to see the Deputy Prime Minister can come up with a statement that Star Wars was all about heroism, as what he mentioned. I am disappointed that they did not manage to see any points beyond that. And coming back to the statement given by the Prime Minister, which he mentioned that the government mentioned that there is none of any scientific logic in Star Wars. Well, I think the difference that is going to be made by the opposition and the government today is that the government does not acknowledge any scientific accuracy in Star Wars at all, because he said the word none. But we, as the opposition, are acknowledging both Star Wars and Star Trek having the multiple scientific technology that are similar and can be used in today's modern world. So that is the difference of the stand between the government and the opposition. So I would like to clarify about the motion, because the deputy prime minister said that Star Wars is not a science fiction but it's a science fantasy. That is what we are saying as well. We did not and never ever argue that Star Wars are science fiction. No, we didn't say that. We didn't come up with such statement. Please don't twist our words. And although Star Wars is a science fantasy, despite being a science fantasy, we do have some accurate scientific points that are relatable about science in the current scenario today. And I really urge the government side to look at our point of view and just don't come up with statements saying that there are none. Please. So now I would like to get into my substantive material. My point here is that Star Wars are scientifically not only sound but also accurate compared to Star Trek. And before I go on the differences, I would like to address the common technologies that are used in both, like the beam weaponry, shielding, anti-gravity, cybernetics, medicine, 3D imaging and all that. But Star Wars stop there. Star Trek has more, which means they have traveling between universe, the replicator and transporter, which I feel doesn't make sense at all, because they are out of reach technology at the atomic level, and this technology will just remain as a theory and they are not feasible for practical use, especially so it automatically making it not sound to science. Okay, so and not only that, Star Trek violates the law of science persistently again and again, because it has time travel, it has teleportation, it has humanoid aliens, it has supernatural elements like example Charlie X, the School of Gotos, and the list goes on and on. So Star Wars on the other hand has talking robots, has futuristic weapons, has no time travel, some realistic spaceship that is that can be related in today's science, diverse aliens. We don't have human aliens, we have diverse type of aliens which is more accurate to science, some humanoid and others not. So Star Trek isn't really a science fiction. Actually, it's a cross fantasy between science fiction, since it mixes supernatural elements. Star Trek has supernatural elements. Okay, so the government side are all wrong, or at least right for the very wrong reason for whatever they are saying, because when you're paying attention to your science doesn't mean you are getting it right. And I would like to, because the government said that we have none. We have not even one point that is scientifically accurate for today's science. So I would like to explain what uh, are the signs that we can find in the Star Wars movie. Okay, firstly, as I think our deputy prime minister mentioned about Princess Leia. Do you remember this dialogue from Star Wars? Help me, you are my only hope. Princess Leia spoke this classic line in a distressed, translucent 3D projected version. So not only 3D projected versions are out of the world possibility, it is already something that we have now, and it's very commonly used. And I don't know how you can deny that 3D technology is not one of the science closest one that we can find right now. 3D technology is using advancedly in VR and AR right now, and there are plenty examples of projected holograms throughout the world today. Anything from we even hologram Tupac's performance at Coachella back in 2012. Now it's 2021, and this thing you cannot deny that we have the accuracy. Okay, we project 3D, and these projections rely on a visual perspective and aspect analysis to project a complex object for viewing capability on a simpler plane. Secondly, that was the 3D projection was the first point of why Star Wars is scientifically not only sound but accurate. Secondly, droids, the usage of droids. The deputy prime minister also mentioned about droids. We have seen all the videos from the humanoid robot Sophia until the Hanson robotics and the jumping cheetah robot. We have seen all of that, and it is entirely possible that sometime in our lifetime we are seeing droids all around us. How can you deny that we don't have any? Have you seen Star Wars and they have driving droids? What's the difference between droids and robots? Is because droid is like they have more independence than robots. So as in Star Wars, you have your R2D2, right? And then it is an automatically driving robot. Okay, but now as we can, when I want to relate it to modern science, and now that we have Google is testing a self-driving car that can operate safely and autonomously in regular traffic. We have automatic car, those are droids. The vehicle uses technology. Okay, so with this I oppose the motion that I'm strongly opposing the motion that Star Wars are scientifically Star Trek is scientifically sound than Star Wars. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for their remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, and the honorable educators, I shall now call upon the government whip to rebut.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, let's start today's debate session. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Assalamu alaikum, and ladies and gentlemen, in the year of lockdown, still we are not locked up to let our voice heard in today's debate session. A good day ahead for the start, I would say. So forget all the points coming from the opposition side. We from the government side could have written a well-prepared e-book with 100 pages of the actual fact why Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars. I guess the opposition side are not understanding the motion for today, which is scientifically sound. All right, so prepare your ears, ladies and gentlemen, because I've prepared my words specially for today's debate session. So now as the third speaker, my role will definitely be the wildest, as my ultimate job will be rebutting and attacking all those empty cannons coming from the opposition side. While members of the floor wondering where to start first, worry not, because before attacking the head, I'll be destroying the tails completely to put down the opposition side. Now let's begin with the honorable second speaker. All right, so here's her point. So before I'm going for the point here, I would just like to highlight a bit what has been stated by my Prime Minister for today's debate session. So he told that the differences between the genre, which is Star Trek, and also Star Wars, whereby Star Trek is much more realistic and connected to the real world, whereby we can actually gain information by by watching, and everything is connected to what happened around it. So this is what this sci-fi genre about. So what about Star Wars? It is just a fantasy, and we are watching that for literally for fun without really gaining information, because it's just unrealistic and full of imagination and magic. When it comes to magic, then there is suddenly there, which is literally not scientifically sound. All right, so moving on to the points from the second speaker. She said that we are saying they didn't say that Star Wars is not a sci-fi, and you agree that it is fantasy, but still it is something that sounds scientific. So I don't get it here when you say you are agreeing that a fantasy genre actually sounds scientific. Where did you get the idea from, whereby we are agreeing that Star Trek originally as a sci-fi genre that is obviously sounds scientific compared to Star Wars itself? Then she say Star Trek violates the science because it has some kind of time travel and has supernatural elements, while Star Wars has spaceship, diverse aliens. 1 minute, please. Diverse alien and humanoids, etc. So she's giving the difference why Star Trek violates the science. Now, we are not talking about the science violation. We are talking what actually sounds much more scientific, much more connected to the real world, much more connected to scientific fiction, and not literally coming from your imagination. So if you say, she come out with another point that she said, if you are paying attention to science, doesn't mean you are right. Now, members of the floor, we are literally talking about something that sounds scientifically correct. So that is why we need to pay attention to science. And when we say about science, when we talk something about science, like for example, this Star Trek movie, for instance, that means we are correct. And then suddenly you come out telling about the characters like what, Princess Leia. Can you see something that sounds princess is obviously something that coming from your imagination? They didn't deny the genre itself. And our motion, which we want something that sounds scientifically, we don't want something that fantasizes the science. You are fantasizing the science, and you need something, you need the science to come out with something that you imagine. So that's all for this speaker number 2. We'll be moving on to the first speaker, but before that, any one of you? Any POI? No? Okay, so I don't waste my time here. So I will moving on to the first speaker, whereby she says, so here's a point. She said that fantasy is imagining something imaginative. But then here comes the technology advancement in today's that bring imagination into something realistic. Now, at the very first hand, does this sound actually scientifically correct? Does it sound scientifically at the very first place? You are bringing science, you are bringing your imagination to become a science. And then you say that sounds science. It's definitely not. Secondly, she said, the still things brought by this technology advancement actually way better, proving Star Wars is scientifically sound than Star Trek. And then she said how advancement of robots is useful. Like, for example, someone stuck in a room and then the robot will come and help us. So, and then she just conclude everything. Like she said, all right, so the members of the floor need to realize that Star Wars is more logic. Now, I'll be rebutting everything coming from her. Now, you are not answering our burden of proof why Star Wars sounds more scientific compared to Star Trek. No, this is the matter of sound scientifically, not look scientifically. Okay, what is that so? Why is that so? You are considering something imaginative to be exactly come true with the help of the advanced technology. Now, members of the floor, don't you realize that why Star Trek sound more scientific? It's because the technology advancement itself generated the idea from the sci-fi genre, from the movie Star Trek itself, whereby Star Wars is just your imagination that will need some other sources to make it come true. A simple analogy: you are wishing your favorite food to be in front of you just in a blink of an eye, whereby it's an imagination. You are influenced by the movie like Star Wars, which is fantasy. And then you need something, you need to find a whole thing to overcome your imagination and making it come true. So to get that imagination come true, for sure you are influenced by the sci-fi genre movies such as Star Trek. I guess the opposition love imagination. Now let's imagine that this motion today should be accepted. That one is much more better. And then you keep on highlighting that the technology advancement, which is good, but then it doesn't define that Star Wars is scientifically sound just because you prove that something was done based on the movie. It shows that you are not gaining information and making use of the information, but you keep on fantasize everything. Like, I guess later on, we just imagine ourselves debating in the Mars then. So, well, now I'm going to highlight the point before I end my speech. Glad to end my speech by restating the points from our side, whereby Star Trek is much more scientifically sound than Star Wars, based on our views, which are the genre, technology, content, and Star Trek is more connected to the real world. So that's all for today. Hit me up anytime. Now I rest my case. You guys can rest your mind. Hope the motion accepted. Have a good day and thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for that speech. It is now time to listen to the rebuttals of opposition whip.
Hello, am I audible? Am I audible? Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Hello?
I think it's a bit
Yeah?
slow.
Oh, what about now?
Can you say
Is
something
it better
again?
now? Yeah, is
Okay.
it better now? Okay,
All right,
okay.
right.
So a very good, okay, I will start in 3, 2, 1. A very good day I bid to the adjudicators and my fellow debaters. The motion for our debate today is that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars, and we, the opposition side, object to this motion. And as the third speaker of the opposition side, I will address all the weaknesses in the arguments that the government side provided and reaffirm my team's case and ultimately prove that we have the better stand on this debate. So first of all, let's refer back to the arguments brought up by the government side, shall we? So the government side mentioned that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars just because it has much relatively closer. It is relatively closer in terms of settings, and that Star Wars promote more elements such as magic. Now, let me just tell you what magic is. Is magic is just unexplained science, and science is something that makes it a reality, which is why the rebuttal is out of the which is why their point is out of the picture, because this is not a matter of magic or a matter of that is not scientifically sound. It is something that is possible, and they keep highlighting on the fact that it is a fantasy. It is a fantasy, but like mentioned by my first speaker, long time ago, even going to the moon was a fantasy. Even exploring Mars, finding life on Mars was a fantasy, and now it has come true. And this movie Star Wars scientifically sound because it is providing for us with the insights. And when they say that, there's one of the speakers that mentioned about the medical facilities. Now, even in Star Wars, there are medical facilities that make much more sense than what that is more scientifically sound and make much more sense than what was provided in Star Trek. For example, in uh in the movie Star Wars, okay, just let me provide an example, okay. So in the movie Star Wars, there was like the Luke, he got a lot of attention for his remarkably advanced robotic arm, and Anakin Skywalker, the tragically fallen Jedi, becomes a Darth Vader. And I mean, like, the fact that they had advanced robotic arm, and this arm was used in a research team right now based on inspired by the movie Star Wars. Meanwhile, in the movie Star Trek, they have this thing
POI.
called unnatural selection decline. I'm sorry. they have this thing called unnatural selection, where when Dr. Pulaski is infected with a disease that alters the DNA and rapidly aging her, they use this, they get a sample of DNA and infect it, use a filter, and then suddenly she's back from an old age to a younger age. And that is much more of something that is not scientifically sound than what is shown in Star Wars. So when they are saying that we are all talking about fantasy, it is wrong because we have
POI.
provided a lot of proof. I'm sorry, decline. We have provided a lot of proof that Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars. For example, as mentioned by my team's first speaker and second speaker, they have mentioned several points such as the Star Wars, which portray a completely diverse set of worlds, and that the fact that they provide advancement in robotics, physics, and force and stuff. These were not addressed thoroughly by the government side, and they keep blaming us for talking about fantasy and talking about magic. And next, the first speaker of the government also mentioned that since Star Wars have clones, it is a very impossible thing, and Star Trek is more scientifically sound because it does not have any clone. Now, in real life, we have tried cloning. Dolly the ship was the first clone in here in Earth on Earth. So cloning is possible, and when they are saying that just because Star Wars has clones, it is impossible and not scientifically sound, it is opposing the entire statement because it is scientifically sound and it's even possible and it's even happening. It has happened, and the government side also mentioned about the Star Trek discovering new technology, but they themselves mentioned that the Star Wars have a clone is unrealistic. So what better technology is mentioned by the Star Trek in terms of something that is scientifically sound? And they mentioned that Star Wars is only about heroism and redemption, while Star Trek makes much more sense. But this heroism, redemption, this is all part of science. Emotions are science, the chemicals from our brains and all, these are all parts of science. So it is scientifically sound because Star Wars is addressing these issues compared to Star Trek. And hold on, let me just check what else was mentioned by the government. Yeah, in the government side, in terms of medical facilities, they mentioned that they have tricorders that can diagnose any disease. This was mentioned by the second speaker of the government. Now, does this sound scientifically sound to you, ladies and gentlemen? Something that can diagnose any disease, and you don't even need a doctor or what, you just use the tricorder and diagnose any disease. But in comparison, okay, let me provide an illustration. Um, yeah, in Star Wars instead, we have something. We in the movie it depicts that they have medical facilities in space, and they obviously do not use tricorders. So that is much more uh, scientifically sound. And once again, I will just reaffirm with today's motion that in referring back to this motion, whether Star Trek is more scientifically sound than the Star Wars, this how it is obvious that the opposition side has made a more compelling case on the issue, and the government side had brought up some interesting facts. However, they seem to be circling around the same points and paraphrasing points of each other's arguments, whereas we, the opposition side, have been more comprehensive on why we must object to the motion being present today. And I hope that members of the floor will also agree in objecting today's motion. With that, I rest my case. Thank you.
Now that we have heard all the three speakers from both teams, we shall take a short break of 1 minute. During this time, both the government and the opposition teams will prepare the reply speech. The time of 1 minute has ended. I shall now invite the opposition leader from the opposition team to deliver the reply speech.
All right. I'm audible, right?
Yes.
All right. I'll start my reply speech in three, two, one. To the members of the floor, welcome for the very last time from today's opposition. It is now my pleasure to summarize this debate and take a look at what both sides have said and see what the outcome of the debate actually is. The government continued on cherry picking on the imaginative part alone and ignore and completely disregard the scientific elements of Star Wars. The government team also randomly stated that the physics law, which was used as an example during the opposition's explanation, was irrelevant without providing a proper explanation. We clearly provided scientific evidence and how the elements from Star Wars is scientifical. The government simply refuses to think out of their box and stay in their so-called boundaries in the name of realistic. The government also clearly refused to think beyond the limits. They clearly fail to see that imagination and innovation are really important in science, and without imagination, science would never have existed. Knowledge without imagination is nothing, and imagination definitely helps scientists to encircle the world, take an overview look, and it acts as a wings that takes throughout the sky and beyond the sky. So when you're putting a limitation in imagining, then you can't move anywhere. Then everything is you should just say we can't move forward. If all of us are in Neolithic era, I think the government team would simply refuse to advance themselves because it requires imagination to even imagine stuff like flying from one area from to another part of the world. At that moment, it might seem unrealistic, but as the technology advances, it definitely has a science behind it, and it is very possible for it to happen. Just because it isn't relative or it isn't applicable right now at this moment, it doesn't mean it has no future prospects towards it. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to reinforce that we have provided various examples and its relativity towards the science that has high possibility. Being realistic doesn't measure the scientific sound, and we have clearly provided many examples and many scientific theories behind every single, not even though not every single, but most of the elements which was pictured in the Star Wars. This definitely overweighs the scientific elements or the scientific sound which was shown in Star Trek. um yeah, technology element advancement that will be forever in the papers as theory, but the today's motion for today is to see which one is more sound or which one makes more sense. Imagination is the very first step to explore, which begins an introductory part towards science. Just because it is not in practice right at this moment, it does not mean it isn't possible to happen. The opposition seemed to revolve around the idea that just because Star Trek is more relevant to today's world, it is more scientifically sound. But I would like all of you to think for a moment that science is in a real life itself, and it is not about what can happen now, but what can happen in the future. And let's face the possibilities that are endless. In a nutshell, I hope that everyone would be able to see that this motion through the lens and side with the opposition in believing that Star Wars is more scientifically sound than Star Trek and not vice versa. I would really hope that the adjudicators and the rest of the chairperson would be able to see a crystal and clear comparison that how we definitely tackle this issue and we overpower the Star Trek. With this, I would like to rest my case. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for that speech. I shall now call upon the Deputy Prime Minister from the government team to deliver their reply speech.
A very good afternoon. So here we go. So here we are again. So basically, I will summarize the points that we, the government, has brought to in order for the House to agree, accept with with today's motion. So firstly, ladies and gentlemen, uh, our prime minister already we already told you that Star Trek is scientifically sound, more scientifically sound than Star Wars. So because Star Trek is Star Trek science, technologies, and the contents is closely related and is the closest related to the reality and the world, ladies and gentlemen, while the Star Wars is not. Because for example, so Star Trek is uh, because the Star Trek is about discovering, exploring new world and something like that, ladies and gentlemen. So while the Star Wars take place in a far, far away in the galaxy, which is not even set, not even mentioning Earth, so it is not plausible to what our world will offer, ladies and gentlemen. So next, I already mentioned about the the things that the Star Trek was the Star Trek sounds more scientific. For example, the droids and the droids and the robots and so on, medical facilities, this weapon photon and proton photon torpedoes and proton, ladies and gentlemen. So I already mentioned the medical facilities, the droids. We aren't telling you the Star Wars was not give robots and so on, ladies and gentlemen. What we are trying to tell you, the robots in Star Trek is more plausible because the robots are made carefully and scientifically by made scientists, while C3PO is made from pieces of junks, ladies and gentlemen. So next about the next, ladies and gentlemen, the medical facility. So we in Star Trek we already have the in the Star Trek ability to scan all the diseases and so on, ladies and gentlemen. So do the reality have offer, ladies and gentlemen, the MRI scan and so on. So it it is somehow related. So it sounds scientific, ladies and gentlemen. So the opposition team sounds like my nieces and nephew. They love to imagine things. So what the opposition team is trying to tell you today, they are imagining things that doesn't sound scientific at all, ladies and gentlemen. So and the analogy about heroism is about scientific, ladies and gentlemen. Is the opposition team try to deem that Aladdin, Chef Jasmine, Princess Jasmine is scientific? Shrek, Princess saving the Princess Fiona is scientific. Maybe Princess Aurora and so on. Nah, it's not scientific. It's fairy tale, ladies and gentlemen. It's all the fantasy. So I hope that the opposition team should be stop fantasizing about fairy tale, telling that fairy tale is about scientific and so on, so on, ladies and gentlemen. So by that, and all the by that I would like to recite that all the points that have been given by the opposition team is sound less scientific compared to the Star Trek, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, me as the third, me as the last speaker for today's, should wanted the whole audience not to imagine but accept today's motion, which is this house believe that Star Trek is sounds Star Trek is more scientifically sound than Star Wars. And by that, thank you.
Thank you. We have now come to the end of the debate. Debaters are asked to remain in this room while waiting for the educators to make a decision. Educators are reminded to move to the educators discussion room in the Cisco WebEx via the link provided. With that, the House of Parliament is adjourned. Thank you.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Chairperson. So I will give the verdict at the end of the feedback. I'll just give general feedback of the whole debate. I'm afraid, we have not enough time. So generally, this debate, I have to say, it's lacking of substance. Like what you are trying to give me or you're trying to discuss here, it's not what do you call that? There's nothing much going on in this debate. It's just basically both sides trying to just enhance their stance by repeating your motion. Okay, I think Star Trek is more scientifically sound on the government side, and the opposition side you keep saying Star Wars is more scientifically sound. But what I really need is the rationale behind why it is more scientifically sound. As the government, you need to prove to me that Star Trek is more than just that, because Star Trek was a sci-fi based, in a TV series in the 1960s, and then Star Wars is a space opera is in the late 1970s. No, I don't want to hear that. What I want to hear is what makes it more scientifically sound, what content, and then relate the content to today's science. I want to see the connection between the sciences of in the movie and now and the current science we are having in the reality, so that I can see why it's more scientifically sound. And the Star Wars as well, I also want to see the scientific elements that you really want to highlight, so that I can see that um why it is, the title says it's science fantasy, but in a way the content, from 1977 until now, there's been a journey. Science Star Wars is not the same as it was before. Maybe it has transitioned from sci-fi to science fantasy to sci-fi, or it's science fantasy but then it added more science element. I want to see the transition of Star Wars and Star Trek that makes them more scientifically sound. The content in it, the title doesn't matter. It's Star Trek is categorized as sci-fi and Star Wars is categorized as science fantasy, but it doesn't matter, because what we want to matter is what is inside the plot. And then I think what the lacking of substance, because all of you just give examples and then you didn't categorize it properly. So here, lack of structure. Like when you make up a debate, you need to have a big point, and then from the big point you explain and provide your explanation, then example. So you can see that the point, where are you headed to? Like if you have a point here, then we know, okay, this is your main point. So this is what at the end of the day, this is what you really want me to know, so that the explanation and example is to enhance your point. But right now, from both sides, I don't really get a major point where your what you are trying to tell me. You're just showing me, okay, this example that have, the expansion of the planet. There's so many planets, and then at this side you say something about the cloning, and suddenly the lightsaber comes up, and then all this is all over the place. I want to know, like, how are you going to categorize this and let me understand? So you can say the advancement in terms of biology, chemistry, and physics. So I can see like the cloning and also the your hands, like the healing of wounds, things like that. Their medical facility, I can see, okay, it's biological advancement, healthcare advancement. I can see it's related to healthcare, so I can see that how close it is that Star Trek or Star Wars are related to the current health science. Because as a person that doesn't watch Star Trek or doesn't watch Star Wars, I do not know what the movie is about. I think I need more clarification what is going on in the movie. Because right now I'm just getting blur glimpse and I don't know how to relate all these points. Because I said you don't have a clear structure, so it's kind of all over the place. Both sides, I have to say. So like the lack of the substance that you want to say, maybe you have substance, but when you doesn't really piece them together in a proper structure, it just get lost. It's like a one-liner, and then I tend to miss it as a person who listens. I cannot get every line you say and then think about it, because debate is going very fast. So I need you to structure for me so that I don't have to process what you say, and it saves time as a person who is listening at the side and a person who has zero knowledge, basically zero knowledge on both of these um what we call it, these movies. So I don't have to piece them together, and don't. And also one thing is that if I try to piece them together, I might piece them wrongly, and this is where bias occurs. So I really want that both sides to really piece them for me and tell a complete story sequentially, so that I know the progression of the story and where is your stance. Okay, so yeah, so basically it's the both sides you have your weakness, but based on this debate, I think what I can what really defines the winning, it's I think it's more of the comparison of the content, and I can see that one side has more give me more explanation or a deeper understanding on their stance. So the verdict is it's a unanimous decision of three edges. So the motion is rejected, so the win goes to the opposition. Yeah, if you want a personal feedback, you can directly message me via WhatsApp. Congratulations to all of you for doing a good job in this debate. So have a lunch break and then see you all next round. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.